The emergency beacon cut through the void of space like a scream in the darkness. Captain Zethkar of the Confederation vessel Harmony's Edge stared at the readings with growing dread. His forearms trembled as he processed the data streaming across his console. "Sir, the readings are confirmed," reported his navigation officer, her voice barely a whisper. "The Devourers have broken through the Kepler defense line. Estimated time until they reach the core worlds, 14 standard cycles." Zethkar's elongated skull ridge darkened with stress patterns. In all his 200 years of service, he had never seen anything like this. The Devourers were an ancient enemy, machines of pure destruction that consumed entire star systems to fuel their endless expansion. For millennia, they had remained dormant in the galaxy's dark edge, but something had awakened them. "How many ships do we have left?" he asked, though he already knew the answer would crush what little hope remained. 47 vessels across all fleets, sir. The Devourers destroyed everything else in the initial assault. They didn't even slow down. Our plasma cannons barely scratched their hulls." The bridge fell silent except for the soft hum of life support systems. 47 ships against an armada that had already consumed 3 star systems. It wasn't a battle anymore, it was an execution waiting to happen. Zethkar's tactical display showed the grim reality. Red markers indicated Devourer positions advancing through space like a plague. Behind them lay nothing but empty systems, stripped clean of all matter. Planets, moons, asteroids, even the stars themselves had been consumed and converted into more war machines. "Sir," the communications officer interrupted nervously. "I'm detecting a transmission from Admiral Vexthal on the final stand. She's requesting immediate counsel with all surviving captains." "Put her through." The holographic image of Admiral Vexthal materialized above the central console. Her usually pristine uniform was torn and stained, her face bearing the weight of impossible decisions. Behind her, crew members worked frantically at damaged stations. "Captains," she began without preamble. "I won't waste time with speeches about honor or duty. We all know we're facing extinction. Our weapons can't penetrate their armor. Our shields collapse under their fire. We have one chance left, and it's going to sound insane." She paused, her gaze sweeping across the assembled holograms of the surviving fleet commanders. "We're going to contact the humans." The reaction was immediate. Several captains began protesting at once, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of disbelief. "Admiral, with respect, the humans are a primitive species. They haven't even achieved faster than light travel. Their technology is thousands of years behind ours." Vexthal raised her hand for silence. "I know what you're thinking. The humans are young, barely out of their home system. They fight with chemical explosives and metal projectiles. But there's something about them that none of you have considered." She manipulated her holographic display, bringing up files that most of the captains had never seen. 3 cycles ago, our deep space monitoring stations detected something unusual from the human homeworld. They were conducting what they call war games, simulated conflicts to test their military capabilities. The display showed grainy footage of human military exercises. Primitive aircraft dropping crude bombs, ground vehicles that moved without anti-gravity, soldiers carrying weapons that seemed impossibly basic. "I know what you're seeing," Vexthal continued. "But look closer. Watch how they move, how they think. Our analysts have been studying these transmissions, trying to understand their tactical doctrines." The footage shifted to show human naval battles from their history. Ships made of metal floating on water, engaging in combat with projectile weapons. It looked like something from the dark ages of galactic civilization. "Every other species in the galaxy follows the same basic principles of warfare," Vexthal explained. "Energy shields, plasma weapons, synchronized fleet movements. We all learned from the same ancient texts, developed similar technologies. But humans, they think differently." Captain Zethkar studied the images with growing fascination. The human vessels moved in patterns that seemed chaotic, almost random. Yet there was an underlying logic to it, a kind of controlled madness that he couldn't quite grasp. "They call it asymmetric warfare," the Admiral continued. "Instead of meeting superior force with superior force, they find weaknesses and exploit them. They use terrain, weather, even their enemies' expectations against them. And, most importantly, they never surrender." She brought up more footage, this time showing human infantry in various conflicts throughout their history. Soldiers who fought on despite being outnumbered, outgunned, and surrounded. Warriors who turned defeats into victories through sheer determination and creative thinking. The monitoring data shows something else, Vexthal said, her voice growing quieter. When faced with extinction-level threats, humans don't just fight harder. They innovate. They adapt. They find solutions that shouldn't be possible. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Captain Moresh of the heavy cruiser Eternal Duty was the first to speak. Admiral, even if what you're saying is true, how could we possibly contact them? They don't have quantum communicators. Their fastest ships would take decades to reach us. Vexthal smiled grimly. We're not going to wait for them to come to us. We're going to them. She manipulated the display again, showing the human solar system in relation to their current position. It was far from the advancing Devourer fleet, in a region of space considered so backwater that it didn't even appear on most star charts. I'm ordering all surviving ships to retreat to the Sol system. We'll make contact with the humans directly, explain the situation, and request their assistance. The protests erupted again, louder this time. Admiral, this is madness. They can't possibly help us. We'd be leading the Devourers straight to an innocent world. Our own codes of conduct forbid interfering with pre-FTL civilizations. Vexthal's expression hardened. Our codes of conduct are written by people who assumed we'd always be strong enough to protect ourselves. The Devourers don't follow codes. They don't spare the innocent. If we fall, they'll eventually find the humans anyway, and, when they do, humanity will die without ever knowing what hit them. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle over the assembled captains. At least this way, we give them a chance. And, maybe, just maybe, they'll show us something we've never seen before. Maybe they'll find a way to fight that we never considered. Captain Zethkar found himself nodding slowly. The plan was desperate, potentially suicidal. But, what choice did they have? Continue running until the Devourers caught them? Make a final stand that would last minutes at best? What exactly are you proposing, Admiral? He asked. We send a standard first contact package to Earth. Basic mathematics, scientific principles, a translation matrix. But, we also include tactical data on the Devourers, their capabilities, their weaknesses, everything we know. We show them what's coming and ask for their help. And, if they can't help? If their technology really is too primitive? Vexthal's smile was sad but determined. Then, we make our final stand in their system. We buy them time to prepare, maybe to hide. It won't be much, but it'll be something. The vote was closer than Zethkar expected. Several captains voted against the plan, preferring to retreat to the outer rim and hope the Devourers would somehow miss them. But, in the end, desperation won over pride. 3 hours later, the surviving Confederation fleet began its jump to the Sol system. As they traveled through hyperspace, teams of linguists and scientists worked frantically to prepare the first contact package. It had to be perfect, clear enough for a pre-FTL species to understand, yet comprehensive enough to convey the enormity of the threat they all faced. Meanwhile, Admiral Vexthal stood alone in her ready room, staring out at the swirling colors of hyperspace. She thought about the footage they'd analyzed, the glimpses of human warfare and ingenuity. There was something in their eyes, something in the way they fought, that reminded her of the ancient stories her grandmother used to tell. Stories of the first warriors, the mythical founders of galactic civilization who had faced impossible odds and, somehow prevailed. Most historians dismiss these tales as legends, but Vexthal had always wondered if there was truth hidden in the myths. The humans moved like the first warriors were said to have moved unpredictably, adaptively, with a fierce joy in the face of overwhelming darkness. It was probably just wishful thinking, but, as her fleet hurtled toward an unknown fate, Vexthal allowed herself to hope. Back on the bridge, the countdown to arrival at Sol system continued. Zethkar checked and rechecked the first contact protocols, making sure every detail was perfect. They would have one chance to make their case, one opportunity to convince a species they'd never met to join a war that seemed impossible to win. The irony wasn't lost on him. The Confederation had always prided itself on being the galaxy's protectors, the advanced civilization that guided younger species toward enlightenment. Now they were the ones seeking help, desperate refugees hoping for salvation from a world they'd previously considered too primitive to notice. As the fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, every sensor focused on the small blue world orbiting the modest yellow star. Somewhere down there, on a planet that most of the galaxy had never heard of, lived the beings they hoped might hold the key to survival. The message began transmitting immediately, racing across space at the speed of light toward Earth. Now all they could do was wait and pray that humanity would listen, understand, and somehow find a way to do what the galaxy's most advanced civilizations could not. The fate of every living being in the galaxy now rested in the hands of a species that still used gunpowder and steel. Dr. Sarah Chen nearly dropped her coffee when the alerts started screaming across every monitoring station at the Arecibo Deep Space Array. After 15 years of searching for signs of extraterrestrial intelligence, she had begun to think this moment would never come. Now, as data streamed across her screens in patterns too complex and structured to be natural, she felt her hands shaking with excitement and terror. "This is not a drill," she announced to the night shift, her voice cutting through the sudden chaos. "We have confirmed artificial signals from beyond the solar system. Multiple sources, highly organized transmission patterns, and..." She paused, double-checking the impossible readings. "They're broadcasting on frequencies specifically chosen for maximum penetration of our atmosphere." The implications hit her like a physical blow. These weren't random signals from some distant civilization. Someone was deliberately trying to contact Earth, using methods that showed an understanding of human technology and atmospheric physics. Within hours, every major government on Earth had been alerted. The signal was too strong and too widespread to hide amateur radio operators, and smaller observatories had picked it up independently. The age of humanity's isolation was ending whether world leaders were ready or not. General Marcus Rodriguez stared at the preliminary translation as if it might transform into something less terrifying if he looked at it long enough. The message was impossible to deny: mathematical proofs, scientific constants, and basic physics that demonstrated beyond doubt that it came from an advanced technological civilization. But the content was like something from humanity's darkest science fiction. "An armada of self-replicating machines that consume entire star systems," he read aloud to the assembled Joint Chiefs. "Currently advancing toward the galactic core after destroying 3 separate solar systems. Estimated arrival at Earth in..." He checked the calculations again. "Roughly 18 months if their current trajectory holds." The room fell silent except for the hum of air conditioning and the distant sound of traffic outside the Pentagon. General Rodriguez had faced down human enemies his entire career, but this was beyond anything in his experience. "Sir," Colonel Sarah Mitchell spoke up from her position near the tactical display. "The transmission includes detailed technical specifications of these devourer machines. Their weapons, armor composition, tactical patterns, everything. It's like they're handing us their enemy's entire military manual." "Why would they do that?" asked Admiral Chin Park. "What do they want from us?" The answer came from Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, the lead linguist who had been working frantically to decode the message's more complex sections. "They want our help," she said simply. "A Confederation fleet is requesting permission to enter our solar system and coordinated joint defense. They're asking humanity to join an interstellar war." The questions that followed came rapid fire from around the table. "How many ships are we talking about?" 47 vessels, ranging from small escort craft to what they classify as heavy cruisers. "What kind of technology do they have?" "Energy shields, plasma weapons, faster than light travel." "By their standards, we're using medieval technology." "Then, why do they need us?" Dr. Morrison hesitated before answering. "According to the message, every advanced civilization in the galaxy uses similar tactical doctrines. Similar weapons, similar defensive strategies. The Devourers have adapted to counter all of it. They're looking for something different, something unexpected." General Rodriguez leaned back in his chair, processing the information. "They want us because we're primitive." "Not primitive," Dr. Morrison corrected. "Different. The message specifically mentions human asymmetric warfare doctrines and our tendency to find unconventional solutions to overwhelming problems." Over the next 6 hours, similar conversations were taking place in Moscow, Beijing, London, Delhi, and a dozen other capitals. The world's military and scientific leaders struggled to comprehend the magnitude of what they faced. Humanity had just learned they weren't alone in the universe, and their first contact was a desperate plea for help against an enemy that had already destroyed civilizations far more advanced than their own. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. James McKenna, a military historian at West Point, was reviewing the tactical data when something clicked. He'd spent his career studying human conflicts, particularly those where vastly outmatched forces had achieved impossible victories. As he read the Devourer's specifications, patterns emerged that reminded him of historical scenarios he knew by heart. "The Devourers fight like we used to," he announced to the emergency session that had been convened at the White House. "Their tactics are essentially what we call combined arms warfare, coordinated attacks using different types of units working in perfect harmony. It's incredibly effective against opponents using similar doctrines." President Amanda Reynolds looked up from the translated message she'd been studying. "You're saying their strength is also their weakness?" "Potentially, yes. Their efficiency comes from predictability. They know how their enemies will respond because every spacefaring civilization has developed similar tactical thinking. But human military doctrine has always emphasized adaptability over efficiency." Dr. McKenna pulled up a presentation he'd hastily assembled using the alien tactical data. "Look at these battle records. The Devourers encounter enemy fleets, the enemies form standard defensive formations, and the Devourers systematically destroy them using overwhelming firepower and coordinated movement patterns. It's like watching a chess master playing against opponents who only know one opening." Secretary of Defense Robert Kim frowned at the display. "Are you suggesting we could actually fight these things?" "I'm suggesting we could fight them differently. Every military defeat in human history has taught us new ways to confuse, mislead, and outmaneuver superior forces. Guerrilla warfare, asymmetric tactics, psychological operations, none of that appears in these alien tactical databases." The room buzzed with nervous energy as the implications sank in. It was audacious beyond belief, but it was also the first glimmer of hope anyone had offered since the message arrived. Within 12 hours, humanity's response was ready. The decision to allow the alien fleet into the solar system hadn't been unanimous. Several nations had argued for attempting to hide from the coming threat instead. But the scientific consensus was clear: if the Devourers were systematically consuming star systems, Earth would be found eventually. Better to face them with allies than alone. The response message was crafted by a team of linguists, scientists, and military strategists working around the clock. It accepted the Confederation fleet's request for sanctuary and offered humanity's full cooperation in defensive preparations. But it also included something the aliens hadn't expected: detailed analyses of human military history, tactical doctrines, and strategic thinking. Dr. Chen personally oversaw the transmission from Arecibo. As the message raced toward the incoming alien fleet, she wondered if humanity was about to make the greatest alliance in its history or the most catastrophic mistake. The alien response came faster than anticipated. Admiral Vexthal's fleet had been monitoring Earth's communications since entering the solar system, and their advanced computers had been working to decode human languages in real time. When humanity's acceptance arrived, it included translation matrices that dramatically accelerated the process. Captain Zethkar was among the first to review the human tactical files, and what he found there challenged everything he thought he knew about warfare. Humans had fought conflicts where small forces defeated large ones, where technologically inferior armies had overcome superior opponents, where the very principles of logical military action had been turned upside down. "Look at this engagement," he said to his tactical officer, highlighting a historical battle on his display. Human forces during what they call the Vietnam War. A technologically advanced military with complete air superiority, overwhelming firepower, and superior numbers is gradually defeated by an enemy using improvised weapons and unconventional tactics. His tactical officer studied the data with growing amazement. "Sir, this doesn't make sense according to standard doctrine. The technologically inferior force should have been eliminated in the opening engagements." "That's exactly the point," Zethkar realized. "Humans don't follow standard doctrine. They adapt their tactics to exploit their enemies' expectations." Similar revelations were occurring throughout the Confederation fleet as they studied humanity's military history. The humans had fought wars using strategies that no military academy in the galaxy would have taught. They used terrain, weather, psychology, and their enemies' own strengths against them. Admiral Vexthal reviewed the tactical files with growing excitement and disbelief. Here were detailed accounts of naval battles where outnumbered fleets had used fog, storms, and creative formations to defeat superior enemies. Ground conflicts where defenders had held impossible positions through pure determination and tactical innovation. Air campaigns where pilots and obsolete aircraft had outmaneuvered state-of-the-art fighters through unpredictable maneuvering and split-second decision-making. They fight like no species we've ever encountered, she announced to her senior staff. Every engagement is treated as a unique puzzle to be solved rather than a standard scenario to be executed. Her intelligence officer brought up more files on his display. Admiral, there's something else. Their military training emphasizes individual initiative and adaptation under pressure. Most of their tactical doctrines are guidelines rather than strict rules. Individual commanders are expected to modify or abandon plans based on battlefield conditions. This was revolutionary thinking to the Confederation military, where precise coordination and adherence to proven tactics were considered the foundation of effective warfare. The idea of encouraging individual commanders to improvise during battle was almost unthinkable. But, as the fleet continued its approach to Earth, Vexthal began to understand why humanity had survived and thrived despite being technologically primitive. They didn't just adapt to challenges, they transformed challenges into opportunities. Every defeat taught them new methods, every victory showed them new possibilities. The first face-to-face meeting between humans and Confederation representatives took place aboard the flightship Harmony's Edge, now orbiting Earth at a respectful distance. Dr. Chen led the human delegation, accompanied by General Rodriguez and a team of military advisors and linguists. The aliens were as diverse as the human team had expected. Captain Zethkar resembled a tall, elegant insect with 4 arms and large, multifaceted eyes. Admiral Vexthal looked more reptilian, with scaled skin and a distinctive skull ridge that changed color with her emotions. Others in the Confederation delegation appeared to be silicon-based lifeforms, energy beings contained within technological frameworks, and creatures that defied easy classification. But, despite their physical differences, the urgency in the room was universal. Display screens showed the Devourer fleet's relentless advance, updated in real time by Confederation monitoring stations throughout the galaxy. The enemy was closer than initially calculated, 13 months out, not 18. We have reviewed your tactical databases, Admiral Vexthal said through the translation device that made interspecies communication possible. Your species approaches warfare in ways we have never encountered. But, we must ask, can these methods be scaled to space combat against an enemy that has already proven immune to our most advanced weapons? General Rodriguez studied the tactical displays showing Devourer capabilities. Their ships were massive, heavily armored, and armed with weapons that could crack planets. Their coordination was perfect, their formations textbook examples of overwhelming force deployment. Admiral, he said slowly, everything I'm seeing here tells me that these Devourers are excellent at fighting conventional space battles against conventional enemies. But, has anyone ever tried to fight them unconventionally? The question hung in the air like a challenge. For the first time since the crisis began, Admiral Vexthal allowed herself to feel something that might have been hope. The meeting that followed would reshape both species' understanding of warfare and set the stage for humanity's first interstellar conflict. As data flowed between human and alien tactical computers, new possibilities began to emerge. Possibilities that neither species could have imagined on their own. The Devourers were coming, confident in their invincibility after destroying every force that had opposed them. They expected to find a standard Confederation defensive fleet supported by primitive planetary defenses. What they would actually find was something entirely unprecedented in galactic warfare, a fusion of advanced alien technology and human tactical innovation that would challenge every assumption they had about combat. The galaxy's newest species was about to show its older siblings how to fight a war that couldn't be won through conventional means. The real battle was just beginning. 8 months later, the Sol system had transformed into something unprecedented in galactic history. Where once there had been peaceful planets and empty space, now stretched the most unusual military installation the galaxy had ever seen. Admiral Vexthal stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed command station, watching human and alien engineers work together in ways that still amazed her. Massive asteroid mining operations had been established throughout the system, but, instead of extracting rare minerals, they were hollowing out space rocks and converting them into something that barely resembled traditional military installations. Status report, she requested from Captain Zethkar, who had become her liaison to the human military commanders. The asteroid fortifications are 60% complete, he replied, consulting his datapad. The humans have insisted on designs that our tactical computers can't adequately model. According to General Rodriguez, that's precisely the point. Vexthal nodded, still struggling to understand human strategic thinking. Instead of building standard orbital defense platforms with maximum firepower and shielding, the humans had proposed a network of hollowed asteroids equipped with what they called surprise packages. Each installation looked like space debris from the outside but contained weapons, sensors, and trap mechanisms that could be activated independently.
What about the fleet modifications? Complete on 43 vessels, Zethkar reported.
The human engineers have made significant changes to our standard designs.
That was an understatement.
Human military advisors had taken one look at Confederation warships and immediately began proposing modifications that had horrified alien naval architects.
They removed armor from non-critical areas to improve maneuverability.
They installed primitive human weapons alongside advanced plasma cannons. Most shocking of all, they had demanded the removal of automated fire control systems in favor of human-operated manual targeting. "Sir," interrupted Communications Officer Mortaith from her station. "We're receiving a priority transmission from the Advance Warning Network. The Devourer fleet has been detected at the edge of the Kuiper Belt." The moment had finally arrived. Vexthal felt her stress patterns darkening her skull ridge, but, beside her, she noticed that the human officer showed no signs of panic. General Rodriguez actually smiled.
"Time until arrival?" the Admiral asked.
"Approximately 6 hours, assuming they maintain current velocity," Mortaith replied.
"Perfect," said General Rodriguez, checking his chronometer. "That gives us enough time to implement the Martinez Gambit."
Vexthal still didn't fully understand what the Martinez Gambit entailed, despite months of joint planning. The humans had explained it multiple times, but their tactical thinking remained alien to her. It involved deliberately allowing the enemy to achieve what appeared to be advantageous positions, then exploiting their predictable responses in ways that defied conventional military logic. As alerts began sounding throughout the system, the most unusual fleet deployment in galactic history began to unfold.
Confederation vessels took positions that seemed strategically unsound, scattered randomly throughout the inner system, many of them apparently crippled and drifting.
The asteroid installations powered down to minimum life support, appearing abandoned.
Even the defense platforms around Earth went dark.
To any observer, it would look like the Sol system's defenders had already been defeated by some unknown force. It was exactly the impression they wanted to create.
Deep space sensors tracked the Devourer fleet as it entered the outer system.
The mechanical minds controlling the enemy vessels processed the tactical situation with cold efficiency.
Their targets appeared to have been engaged and scattered by some previous engagement. Standard doctrine called for systematic destruction of the remaining resistance followed by planetary consumption operations.
The Devourer command ship, a massive construct designated Primary Harvester, broadcast directives to its subordinate units. The plan was simple and had proven effective in hundreds of previous systems. Smaller vessels would hunt down and destroy the scattered enemy ships while larger units prepared to strip mine the inhabited worlds. Admiral Vexthal monitored the enemy approach from her position aboard the modified heavy cruiser Harmony's Edge, now drifting apparently powerless near Jupiter. Her ship's emissions had been reduced to barely detectable levels, and her crew lay in specially designed acceleration couches, prepared for maneuvers that would have been impossible in a standard vessel configuration. "Enemy fleet is separating as predicted," reported the human tactical officer who had been assigned to her ship. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Walsh had insisted on replacing the traditional Confederation battle management system with what she called organic tactical coordination. Instead of automated responses to enemy actions, human officers would make split-second decisions based on battlefield intuition and pattern recognition.
"Devourer hunter groups are moving to engage our apparent survivors," Walsh continued. "Primary fleet maintaining standard formation approach to Earth."
This was the critical moment. For months, human strategic planners had studied Devourer tactics, looking for patterns and weaknesses. What they'd found was a military doctrine so refined and efficient that it had become predictable. The Devourers always responded to apparent weakness with overwhelming force, always maintained precise formations, always followed optimal attack patterns.
"All units, this is Admiral Vexthal," she broadcast on the encrypted human communication frequency. "Execute Phase 1.
Throughout the solar system, ships that had appeared dead suddenly roared to life. But, instead of engaging the enemy directly, they began implementing tactics that would have been considered insane by traditional military standards. Near Mars, Captain Zethkar's vessel Final Stand suddenly accelerated at maximum burn directly toward a Devourer hunting group. To the mechanical minds commanding the enemy ships, this appeared to be a desperate suicide charge by a damaged vessel. They moved to intercept and destroy the apparent threat using standard energy weapon arrays. What they didn't expect was for Zethkar's ship to suddenly jettison its entire cargo bay, revealing modified human nuclear weapons with crude chemical thrusters. The primitive weapons were too small and slow to threaten Devourer capital ships, but they weren't aimed at the capital ships. The nuclear devices detonated in precisely calculated positions, creating electromagnetic pulses and radiation fields that interfered with Devourer sensor arrays. For 17 crucial seconds, the hunting group was effectively blind. In those 17 seconds, the real attack began. Hidden among the asteroid belt, human-modified mining charges began detonating in sequence. Not to damage enemy ships directly, but to launch clouds of metallic chaff and debris that would further confuse sensors and provide cover for what came next. Lieutenant Colonel Maria Santos had proposed the most audacious element of the plan. Instead of meeting the enemy in traditional ship-to-ship combat, small teams of human marines in modified EVA suits would attempt to board Devourer vessels during the chaos. It was tactically insane, humans using personal weapons against starships, but that was exactly why it might work. Boarding Team Alpha is away, reported Commander Walsh as Santos's team launched from their concealed position aboard a disguised cargo pod. Target is the Devourer command vessel for Hunting Group 7. Admiral Vexthal watched the tactical display with a mixture of fascination and horror as human boarding teams moved through space like ancient naval commandos, using the confusion and sensor interference to reach enemy ships undetected. Their mission wasn't to capture the vessels, that would be impossible. Instead, they carried specialized charges designed to disrupt Devourer coordination systems from within. The first boarding was successful beyond anyone's expectations. Devourer ships had been designed to resist external attacks, not internal sabotage by individual biological units. Santos's team penetrated the hull, placed their charges, and escaped before the enemy even realized they had been boarded. When the charges detonated, the effect rippled through the Devourer command network. These machines had operated as a collective intelligence for so long that they had no protocols for dealing with ships that suddenly stopped responding to central coordination. Hunting Group 7 is showing signs of tactical confusion, Walsh reported with obvious satisfaction. They're reverting to individual ship protocols and breaking formation. This was exactly what the human planners had hoped for. Devourer's strength lay in their perfect coordination and overwhelming firepower. Separated, individual ships were still formidable but no longer invincible. All units, execute Phase 2, Vexthal ordered. The asteroid fortifications that had appeared abandoned suddenly revealed their true purpose. Instead of traditional weapons, they launched thousands of small projectiles, space debris accelerated to incredible velocities by magnetic launchers. The projectiles were too small to be effectively targeted by Devourer point defense systems, but, at relativistic speeds, even a paint chip could punch through armor. Meanwhile, the scattered Confederation vessels began implementing human pack hunting tactics. Instead of the traditional line of battle formations that Devourer tactical computers expected, small groups of ships began coordinated attacks from multiple angles, using irregular timing and unpredictable maneuvers. Captain Yethmar found herself commanding a 3-ship squadron executing what the humans called a wolf pack attack against a Devourer heavy destroyer. Instead of approaching in formation, her ships came from different directions at different times, forcing the enemy to constantly adjust its defensive posture. Target their weapon mounts, advised her human tactical officer, Lieutenant Jason Park. Don't try to destroy the ship, just make it less effective. It was frustrating to conventional military thinking. Confederation doctrine called for the complete destruction of enemy vessels to remove them as threats. But human doctrine emphasized mission effectiveness over numerical superiority. A damaged ship that couldn't fight effectively was just as good as a destroyed ship, and much easier to achieve. The results were dramatic. Yethmar's squadron managed to disable the destroyer's main weapons without losing a single ship, something that would have been impossible using traditional tactics. But the real test came when the main Devourer fleet reached Earth's orbital space. The primary harvester and its escort vessels represented the enemy's full strength, enough firepower to crack planets and strip solar systems. General Rodriguez watched their approach from the hidden command bunker that had been constructed inside Luna. Activate the Hail Mary protocol, he ordered. The Hail Mary was humanity's most desperate gambit, proposed by Dr. Sarah Chen after months of studying Devourer operational patterns. If it worked, it might end the war in a single stroke. If it failed, Earth would be destroyed within hours. Around the globe, massive electromagnetic pulse generators that had been constructed under the cover of atmospheric research facilities began charging to full power. The plan was to create an electromagnetic field so intense that it would disrupt Devourer systems across the entire inner solar system. The risk was enormous. The pulse would also disable every piece of human and Confederation technology in the area. For approximately 30 minutes, both sides would be reduced to fighting with whatever backup systems they could devise. EMP generators at 90% charge, reported the technical coordinator.
All ships have confirmed they are prepared for system shutdown.
Admiral Vexthal, now commanding the final phase of the battle from her ship hidden behind Luna, made the most difficult decision of her career.
Execute Hail Mary. All units prepare for complete systems failure in 30 seconds.
The electromagnetic pulse that erupted from Earth was visible from orbit as sheets of aurora dancing across the planet's atmosphere. Every electronic system in the inner solar system went offline simultaneously: Devourer ships, Confederation vessels, orbital platforms, even the backup systems in the hidden command bunkers. For 30 minutes, the most advanced technological civilizations in the galaxy fought like their ancestors had fought thousands of years earlier.
But humans had prepared for this moment.
While Devourer ships drifted helplessly, their mechanical minds unable to function without their electronic systems, human crews across the fleet began implementing backup protocols that required no technology more advanced than chemical explosives and mechanical systems. Lieutenant Santos, now commanding a boarding team equipped with purely mechanical weapons and old-fashioned explosive charges, led the assault on the primary harvester itself. Without its defensive systems, the massive ship was vulnerable to the kind of close-quarters combat that humans had perfected over millennia of warfare. When the EMP effects finally faded and electronic systems began coming back online throughout the solar system, the tactical situation had been completely reversed. The Devourer fleet was crippled, their command structure destroyed, their coordination network in shambles. The remaining enemy ships, now operating as individuals rather than as part of a collective intelligence, were systematically hunted down by